friends. Time for a one-to-one chat about the Gaza Pier. I've been bringing you information on it every time they have a new update. I was opposed to it as a US taxpayer from the get-go. I didn't feel like it was proper to build a pier for an organization that is an Iranian proxy for terrorism. And even though the aim was to facilitate aid going into the country, unsupervised aid given to terror organizations is usually sold to the population that it's supposed to be given to for free. And there were deaths associated with Palestinians trying to access the aid, in addition to the fact that it circumvents the command and control that the Israelis are exerting over the ports of entry as they wage their war against Hamas. And so, with all of that being the reality, I didn't feel myself outside of the pale or away from common thought orthodoxy on whether or not we should continue in this effort or begin it in the first place. Our role here is to sit back quietly and, when asked, provide some support to the Israelis in the form of selling them arms and weaponry to support their cause, but never to step in and actually control or exert influence over them when they're trying to eradicate an organization that killed over 1,200 of their citizens. And the easiest way to think about this is, what would America do if the similar action was taken against our country and some of our allies attempted to get us to move in one direction or other, especially if those intentions seem to be at opposition with our stated intent of eradicating the threat to our citizens. So, this is a national sovereignty issue. Israel is a sovereign state. And while we have very close ties, at the end of the day, the final decision making is theirs. So, the pier is an insult to the Israelis. And I don't know if it was their prayers or the fact that it was just a plain old dumb idea from the start. It hasn't worked out. It has been a source of contention. It's constantly breaking apart like a Lego set that has been improperly put together. It literally looks as if they took big pieces of the steel gray colored Legos. I can literally see them in my mind's eye because we have so many of them still here at this house from our children's childhoods. And they locked them together, set them on top of the ocean with a tangential connection to the sand, and then expected it to operate as a pier. Now, all respect to the US Army Corps of Engineers who were integrally involved in this project, but they had very little notice with which to put it together. That's the first thing. It wasn't well planned. Number two, it didn't have congressional oversight. Number three, what line item did they move around from the budget at the Pentagon, Department of Defense, or any other agency? Where did they move the funds from to spend the money here? And it is a significant amount of money. I know most of the time here on the news, we talk about, 200 million this, 300, billion that. The numbers are astronomical. But what I'm seeing here is a desire to waste money that doesn't belong to them. See, I think it's interesting that when the money is in my bank account, it's my money. But then as soon as it goes into the US Treasury, it becomes government money. And at that point, the people who are in charge of managing the government's money, a euphemism for taxpayer dollars, because the government truly has no money of its own. It's not an entity that actually has its own money. Every penny that the US Treasury holds is on behalf of the US taxpayers. It's amazing how, when that transition occurs, when the electronic funds transfer happens, then all of a sudden, the idea that the money should be spent logically, that there should be oversight, that there should not be money wasted, that goes out the window. So the same individuals who are fiscally sound and responsible in their personal finances are then crazily and outlandishly irresponsible when it comes to spending money on behalf of taxpayers. So $230 million is probably what some people would call a rounding error for the US government with our multi-dollar deficits. But I, as a US taxpayer, feel this was a waste of time. It wasn't a humanitarian pier. The terrorists don't deserve our assistance. And even though they bill this as something temporary, I see it as a failure. This is not the outcome they were hoping for, because the war is not yet over. The humanitarian aid was not delivered. And we now have this as an eyesore with people online mocking the United States for our failed pier. They call it the Biden pier. And I think that's appropriate. So we'll see what happens next. It's been dismantled a couple of times. We'll see what they do with the waste from it. But in the meantime, up next, the University of Missouri has removed racial criteria when awarding scholarships and funds to current and future students. Dr. Jared Ross will join me with more on this. Stay with us.